Hey everyone, I'm Matt, and welcome to the Good Trouble Show. Today we have the legendary Dave Scott, the host of Spaced Out Radio, joining us. It's going to be fun. But first, do us a solid and hit that thumbs up and subscribe button. Also, leave a comment and let us know what you think about this interview. We are also on all podcasting platforms, so if you feel like listening to our show on the drive to work, just search for The Good Trouble Show with Matt Ford. Finally, your financial support enables us to bring you this show with exceptional guests. You can become a Patreon supporter for the monthly price of a Starbucks coffee. Go to patreon.com/The Good Trouble Show and choose the plan that's right for you. You can buy us a cup of coffee all the way to managing the whole store. Also, on YouTube, Super Chats are open and are a great way to show us your love. We very much appreciate it. So let's not keep the man waiting. Just a few years ago, while on a road trip through Colorado, I decided to listen to a podcast. I was fascinated by UFOs, so I typed in UFOs in the search bar, and our next guest's podcast was the first thing to pop up. I hit the subscribe button, and I've been a fan ever since. Please welcome from Spaced Out Radio, Dave Scott. Dave, how are you?
I am great, Matt. How you doing? It's good to be back with you. I put a necktie on because you're always wearing a beautiful necktie, and I figured I better put one on as well in order to, spruce up my image a little bit.
Well, I have to say, you look fantastic. That is a great look for you. So yeah, I absolutely love it. So let's jump right into it. So we had some really big UFO news this week with the NASA panel, or whatever you want to call it, that occurred on Wednesday. So to be honest, I've only been able to kind of watch some sort of sections of it. But was it a nothing burger? Was it something significant? What do you think about that whole thing?
Look, there's going to be people out there who say, Matt, that we got to be taking baby steps in order to get this story out full-fledged. But we've been taking baby steps for 7 years since the To the Stars Academy came out with Tom DeLonge and his crew back then. And then, of course, that led to the New York Times article and the 3 videos that had come out. The one thing that I was very concerned with when it came to NASA was the fact that it seemed like the scientists who were involved really had no idea what UAP or UFOs were all about. I'm still a UFO guy, okay? I haven't bought into this whole UAP thing. The one thing that I have learned over the last number of months, especially since the Chinese drone incidents, was that UAP seems to me, and I know I'm in the minority with this, okay? But to me, UAP are man-made. UFOs are not. And I'm pretty staunchly steadfast on that opinion right now. And the one thing that that really seemed to bother me about the entire aspect of this preliminary panel, and of course, we're going to get more because that's all they ever say.
Right.
But the thing that really kind of concerned me was this was a NASA report on UFOs. These people who were brought there never brought up NASA once. They never brought up the fact that NASA has had followings of anomalous craft from their rockets from the beginning of Mercury and right up through Apollo, right up through the shuttle program. They never brought that up. They never brought up the fact that many of their own astronauts and test pilots, from the X-15 to the Bell X-1 to the U-2 spy plane to the SR-71, had incursions with this. They were more interested in learning about what the FAA had to say. They were more interested in learning about where the hot spots are in North America. My question is this: what do hot spots and what do the FAA have to do with NASA? This whole preliminary goal, when Bill Nelson, the executive director, a former congressman, a former astronaut, a year ago, brought it out that we got to learn about these UAPs, okay? Never once have they mentioned NASA. What is in NASA's closet That is the only question that needed to be asked to that 14-member panel. What is in your closet? Okay, Darcy Weir, who is a Vancouver documentarian and filmmaker, recently did a 3-part series on NASA and their cover-ups. He has audio, he has visuals that have been unclassified from astronauts and test pilots saying that they were followed. None of that was brought up. As a person who has a giant interest in NASA, because I love space, I think what NASA has done for the last 70 years is phenomenal. But when we're talking about unidentified flying objects, and you're talking about getting to the truth of the matter, the truth is we need to know what NASA knows. And not one question was asked to that panel about astronauts or about what they know, what they have recorded, both visually and audio and with audio. The other thing that I found very interesting was it was brought up that at the International Space Station, that it's only conspiracy theory that they seem to cut the feed when UFOs are around. They go out and they say, look, space is a very, very difficult place to broadcast live, okay, which I can understand. Sometimes the feed fails because of where they are, or there's, black spots up there that you just can't transmit to. I get that. But there are astronauts who've been on the International Space Station who have filmed and claimed to see through anecdotal evidence that they have witnessed craft of some other phenomena flying on by. We heard nothing of that. So the question is NASA trying to bury this topic, or are they trying to play the funding game, which is, I believe they said it would take about $100 million in order to get the right sensors and the right capabilities to do that. Well, isn't that what Hubble is for? Isn't that what the James Webb Telescope is for? Can they not use that? Do they not already have sensors up there that protect against Russia, that protect against China, or any anomalous force that has invaded space? It doesn't make sense. And to me, I was very disappointed. I was disappointed in people like Chris Mellon, Lou Elizondo, Sean Cahill, not because of the people that they are, but the fact that they said, this was great. There's a giant UFO community out there who just wants to not ask questions, but they want us to follow the narrative, follow the guideline of this is what's put in place. If anybody on this planet knows whether or not there's been craft here, Matt, it's NASA. And we need to know what they know. There is no disclosure without NASA. And this is why I've pushed, you and I have discussed this off the air many a times over the last couple of months. This is why I push that we are not in a disclosure movement. We are in a confirmation of the phenomena, because disclosure means you're telling it all. We're not getting it all. We're not even getting to first base here if we're playing baseball.
Right. Yeah. So one of the things that, just touching about what you were speaking about earlier, so I was watching there was a website where people could submit their questions, and then the questions were upvoted. And I think what you were talking about as far, a few of the things as far as like cutting the feed, but more of the really, the questions really getting to the heart of the matter, like have craft been observed going from deep space into the Earth's atmosphere? I mean, those were like some of the top questions, and they weren't asked at all. It's like they only picked the softball questions.
Very true. I know I asked 3 different questions, including, have you talked to astronauts about this subject? Have you checked in your own closets? Where are the videos? And I also asked about how come Darcy Weir, a person who is a documentarian, has nothing to do with NASA, can get all of the recordings. None of those were asked. I know Tim Senor from our UFO report, he had a press pass to it afterwards, and his question was muffled in with about 5 other questions, and they never got to his part of the question, which really frustrated him. What was the point of opening it up to the public? Here's another interesting point that I noticed. It may not seem like much, Matt, okay, but to me, it was a valid curiosity. And that was On NASA's own YouTube channel, when they were broadcasting the event, they didn't even open up the chat room to that. They had their own chat room closed so the public could not chat in the NASA chat room on YouTube. I found that quite odd. Like, why would you not have that? Granted, you're worried about the trolls, you're worried about the bots and everything that kind of goes along with that. I get that. We get that almost every night on Spaced Out Radio. It is something that, as a channel, you put up with the good, with the bad. But the fact that they closed down the chat room was weird to me. I didn't understand that.
Rewinding a bit, talking about the funding thing. So, and also this kind of, it seems to me like either with Aero or with NASA, everyone wants to start from ground zero. Like this is like a new thing. Like, oh my God, what is this stuff that's floating around in our skies? And by resetting or trying to set the scientific clock from zero, they are ignoring 80 years and billions of dollars of taxpayer-funded money that we have paid for, research that that they have. And so going back to what you're talking about with the whole funding game, to me, that seems like that's a large part of it. And I just scratch my head. It's like, well, what have we been doing, or what have you been spending our money on for 80 years?
Well, here's one thing that we should bring up too, is we are being critical of the program and where they are heading. One of the big things that was brought up in the conference right off the bat was the bullying and online harassment that many of the scientists were taking, that the Aero program was taking. We're talking people calling up everybody on their own phones or emails, lighting them up, not just other scientists who are ridiculing these 14 scientists about getting into this program, but we're talking the UFO public getting in there. There is a big difference between bullying and harassment and being critical. I think the biggest problem we have in the UFO community right now is we're not allowed to be critical. We have to so-called take sides. Look, I'm a fan of NASA. I don't like what they are doing on the UFO front. I've been saying that for the better part of a year and a half now. I want to know what's in your closet. You're going to hear me repeat that a lot tonight. What is in your closet? That is not being critical of Bill Nelson. That's not being critical of any NASA employee. We know that they have it. We know that they do. Show us. If you're about disclosure, show us. It's nothing personal. This is business. If you're going to talk disclosure, you're going to talk UFOs or this UAP crap, okay? Get to the point. And as you said, we're tired of baby steps. How many more baby steps do we have to take regarding this? Whether it's political, whether it's from the military who doesn't want to play this game at all, or NASA itself who injected itself into the conversation. Remember, NASA was silent up until a year ago when Bill Nelson took over. They weren't saying a thing about this topic.
Right.
Bill Nelson comes in, he opens up the door in his first press conference, which blew the minds off of everybody. But he was talking about, I was interested in Navy pilots. I was interested in U.S. Air Force pilots. How about your astronauts, Bill? You were one. You've talked to people who have seen this. Nobody's asked Bill that question, though. And Bill needs to take a stand on that.
And so, yeah, someone needs to ask him the question. Now, rewinding a bit on this NASA hearing. So, the director of Aero, the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, he was one of the first presenters. What did you think about his presentation and what he had to say?
Well, I think he was, playing the good guy game. Look, we know that right now there is a team out there, and if people who are following the ufology, you need to understand there's a team brewing. It involves NASA. It involves Avi Loeb's Galileo project. It involves the Aero program with Sean Kirkpatrick and this new group that is popping up out of nowhere called Enigma Labs. And for some reason, those four have teamed up and they are going to try and control the entire UFO story. Now, that's not conspiracy. This is what we are seeing built on the back end. A lot of people are talking about it on the back end. They're not talking about it on the front end of everything. And the entire goal of this is to control the UFO narrative for technology, for money, for any type of grants, loans, budgets that may come along. It's something that we have to be cognizant of. And, you know, there are rumors out there that in a year to a year and a half, when Sean Kirkpatrick retires from the government and his position at Arrow, that he is going to be joining Enigma Labs in one way or another. That is going around. That seems very logical. You know, one thing that I think what Kirkpatrick said that really caught my interest outside of the bullying and harassment was that he was talking about the idea that we haven't had any sightings or reports in USOs or anything coming from space. Really?
Yeah. Well,
and the other thing that I noticed about the entire panel is I remember talking to some insiders a number of years ago regarding this because they stopped you. If you watched about 3 years ago, Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon, when they did something publicly, they all of a sudden out of the blue stopped using the words Russia and China. And they were talking about off-world craft. Yet we're not allowed to put aliens or extraterrestrials with off-world craft. Who's flying them?
Exactly.
If these aren't coming from any source on planet Earth, who is flying these craft? Where did they come from? Are they time travelers? Are they from a different dimension? Are they from outer space? Somebody or something has to be controlling these craft. Whether there's little mini aliens running around in these orbs that we're seeing all over the place, or whether they are controlling them by remote control like we do drones, something or someone is flying these. Why are we not allowed to talk about that? Why do we have to keep separating extraterrestrial, ultra-terrestrial, extratempestrial, whatever you want to call them, from these anomalous craft?
I mean, it's a completely logical question, because if these things are here, which I know they are, I've seen them with my own eyes on 5 separate occasions, the next logical question is, well, like you said, what is behind them? Is this AI, or there are beings in there? I think for a while I kind of thought, okay, this is something we need to kind of tiptoe around and maybe the public isn't ready for it. I fully believe it's time to rip the Band-Aid off. We have to have this conversation. Truth always wins. So rather than this continued sort of dog and pony show and half truths and all of that, it's really more than enough. We are at the time where we just can't keep effing around, if you know what I mean.
Well, I'm in the category that we're, as a humanity, not the UFO community, but we as humanity are not ready for any sort of contact. I talked to Lou Elizondo about this privately about a year ago, and we were talking about COVID and not the disease or anything like that, but we were talking about the way people were treating people, Matt. Okay, people raiding others' grocery carts, stealing milk, buying 500 pounds of meat in the grocery store, buying 3,600 rolls of toilet paper because for some reason we were running out of toilet paper. Well, the last I looked, I live in the middle of British Columbia. I'm surrounded by trees. There is no shortage of toilet paper in the forest.
Right.
Okay. All right. But the way humanity was treating each other, people ratting people out for not wearing a mask, or people ratting people out for not wearing gloves in their own vehicle while they drove alone. Okay. We were ratting people out. We saw the worst of humanity when COVID hit. And I think that scared a number of people when it came to the disclosure movement or the confirmation movement on whether or not society is real. Look, we can downplay religion. Religion is going to play a big part in this. We can downplay the economy. What happens to Wall Street? Okay. What happens when people just get scared? There is in North America, we have the highest ranking ever of depression and anxiety between people. And when people are depressed, anxious or scared, they do stupid things. Okay? One person isn't dumb. A multitude of people creates a scary time. And I think that was a big part of it. And that's why I don't believe when you still have people on this planet who are partying like it's 1499 through their
Right.
through religion, or you have people on this planet who are living in a jungle who have never seen a white person or an African American person. Okay, what are they going to do when aliens arrive? What are they going to do? You know, I mean, this is a subject. There are very few subjects on this planet, Matt, that are going to affect every single person, from the jungles of Brazil and Vietnam to the high rise structures of Japan and Tokyo, Paris, London, New York, Los Angeles, Toronto. Okay, this is going to affect every single person. And the people controlling this, I do believe, really do feel that the almost 8 billion people on this planet are not ready for that move just yet. But that's my opinion.
So, okay, so speaking of whether people are ready for this, we're going to touch on that. So an article that just came out from Christopher Mellon. So Christopher Mellon, he was the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, and he wrote this piece published in Politico titled, "If the Government Has UFO Crash Materials, It's Time to Reveal Them. The benefits to humanity outweigh the fear of discovering we're not alone in the universe." And I'd like to get your thoughts on that. But before we dig into it, I thought for people that have not read this article, and I highly recommend everyone go and check this out, I sort of cherry picked some of the introductory parts of this. And then later in the article, he lays out 10 reasons why he thinks it's time to rip off the Band-Aid. So I'll read the first part of this. I want to get your thoughts, and then we'll whatever we have time for digging into this. So it opens up. Since 2017, my life has been dominated by efforts to help Congress and the public discover the truth about unidentified aerial phenomenon, or UAP. UAP were routinely violating restricted U.S. airspace, but these encounters, documented on cockpit videos, weren't being reported up the military chain of command because of stigma surrounding the issue. And he goes on to talk about that he was working closely with former Pentagon official Lou Elizondo and later a group of U.S. aviators to capture the attention of Congress and say, hey, this thing's a big deal. He goes on to say, but despite breakthroughs in government transparency about these sightings, there's one thing the Pentagon and the intelligence community have so far not addressed, and that is whether they have had direct contact with these objects. There are persistent rumors that the U.S. government recovered crash materials from UAP, and even that the government has been working secretly to reverse engineer this technology, asking the question, are we alone in the universe? And it's time for the government to answer that question. And he touches here that since ERA, which we spoke about earlier, was established, I being Christopher Mellon, have referred 4 witnesses to ERA who claim to have knowledge of a secret U.S. government program involving the analysis and exploitation of materials recovered from off-world craft. Some have supplied information, and this is a really important thing that I think a lot of people missed. Some have supplied information to the intelligence community's Inspector General, others directly to staff of congressional oversight committees about this crash retrieval program. Now, what I thought was interesting, which touches really to the heart of the matter of what you were just talking about, Mellon asks the question, even I've asked myself this in the amount that I message on this topic. He asks, I've repeatedly had to ask myself, is disclosure in the best interest of the public? Am I doing the right thing, working to bring what could be America's most deeply buried secret to light? So he's essentially saying, am I opening up a Pandora's box? What are your thoughts about what he's had to say so far?
I got 2 points on this. Number one, listeners to my show will know that for the last 2.5 years plus, I have been saying that there is a Pandora's box of UFO information sitting well hidden, and I use this term like 87 floors down below the Pentagon. Obviously it's not that, but there is something that when I read Chris Mellon say that about the Pandora's box, I went to myself and went, holy crap. Like, this is exactly what I have been talking to our SOR public for the last number of years, that there are secrets out there that they don't want us to know. And it's sitting there. It's right there in some room within the Pentagon. And it might not be the Pentagon. It might be some military base or whatever that has the answers that we are all searching for. Look, there are things I don't believe in the UFO field, Matt. Okay, there are things that I question. There are things that make me scratch my head. But the one thing that I have learned is my time as a journalist is I am not closing any doors on that until that Pandora's box is open. Okay, and it may be wild conspiracy theories like Eisenhower back in 1954 trading humans for technology. Do I believe that? No, I don't. Do I want to believe it? It would be real freaking cool. That's for sure.
Right.
Okay. But I don't think questions like that, or what happened at Roswell, do we have bodies? Is there a J-Rod? Did Bob Lazar actually work at Area 51? Or what happened with the Phoenix Lights? Okay. There are a number of situations over time that have happened. Some goofball, some very, very important facts, or maybe important evidence that we have. And that is sitting in that Pandora's box that Chris Mellon talks about. But here's the other thing that I want to make up about Chris Mellon, and this isn't a personal attack against him, but he has been an advisor for most of his political career. What's the job of an advisor? I thought about this the other day. What is the job of an advisor? Their job is to suggest that people of authority, that people of power come out and say, this is real. Well, Chris Mellon, you have the NDAs. You have never, as far as I know, stood up to the public in one of your op-ed blogs, in one of your op-ed articles, on any interview, stood up and said, this is what I know, but I'm not allowed to talk about it. I can only go far as ABC. I cannot tell you DEF due to my non-disclosure agreements, because his entire job is he's always name dropping about Kristen Gillibrand, Marco Rubio, Mark Warner, the Pentagon, the generals. Okay. When is Chris Mellon going to step up? And if you've been a leader this much in front of the camera, but mostly behind the camera, when are you going to step up and tell us what you know, instead of 7 years of suggesting what may be out there? We're tired of the Tom DeLonge, what if I were to tell you that such and such is real? We're tired of that. Give us what you have. If you want to move the ball forward, someone has to take the ball and run a yard, then another yard. Okay, I apologize for using a lot of sports cliches.
You're talking to the wrong guy about sports. I know nothing about it.
Yeah, being a former sports reporter, it just makes life easier for me.
Right.
But just the whole idea of, look, I'm not taking a shot at Chris Mellon, but Chris, if you want to move the ball forward, sometimes you got to pick the ball up yourself and move that ball forward. Stop suggesting of what people could say or should say. What about you, Chris Mellon? What do you know? What aren't you telling us? What can you tell us, and what can you not tell us? I think that's a fair question.
I mean, I definitely would love for him to do just that. So let's get into, because I found these 10 reasons very, very interesting, and where he came to the conclusion that the public needs to know the truth. The first one he mentions, which I truly think is one of the most important, democracy requires transparency. He says, in our democracy, the American people have a right to know the truth of this matter. Censoring vitally important information is inconsistent with our values and institutions. It would be the modern day equivalent, which is a great analogy, of repressing Galileo's insights regarding the solar system or Darwin's theory of evolution. So Dave, do you think there has been transparency? I think the answer is pretty obvious.
No, what's transparency? They have been covering this thing up since they came out as part of the To the Stars Academy. What we have seen, and what many of us haven't fell for, is a narrative that is going on that they want some sort of disclosure, but on their own merit. Look, this is where I really hesitate to kind of go a little woo with you, Matt. Okay, because there are literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people in North America who have spotted what they believe is a UFO. There are thousands of people who claim to have had interaction with extraterrestrials or being abducted or being taken, having implants made, and further than that. Okay. What disclosure is he talking about? Because for those who are affected by this phenomena, one way or another, it's very personal. They want to know what happened to them. I know for me, as an experiencer and as a journalist, the only reason why I got into this and created Spaced Out Radio is because I knew I could ask questions to the right people if I got in front of them. Okay. I just want to know on a selfish level, why me? I didn't ask for this. I was living a happily boring life up until my experiences started. I would love to have that happily boring life again. I'm tired of getting woken up in the middle of the night. Doesn't happen often, but when it does, I'm not a fan of it. And there are people who have it way worse than I do. And look, the skeptics out there will say it's psychosis, it's sleep paralysis, it's all in your mind, it's bad dreams, it's nightmares, it's depression, it's anxiety. No, it's not. Okay, those are the cop-out answers because you don't want to believe it. That's where we subjugate the facts of what are going on to opinion. So getting back on topic with the transparency, disclosure, if you look at the term, the actual explanation of what disclosure is, that's disclosing everything about a topic. So what that tells me is, what do they really know about this? And why have they been trying to control a narrative in the media and with the people since the To the Stars Academy came out? To me, that's the big question. What is disclosure? I would like Chris Mellon to define for the public, not me, but for the public, what is disclosure? Because right now we're confirming it.
Right. And we've talked about this. What is disclosure versus confirmation? Now, his second point, which we touched upon earlier when we were talking about the NASA part, he says that we own any discovery, any recovered materials belong to the American people, and that I think is probably one of the most maddening things. Going back to what we were talking about, where they seem to want to reset the clock to zero, get all of this funding for billions of dollars in funding to investigate this thing that is apparently new, when we know that it's not. They've been looking into this for 80 years. I mean, you're in Canada. I don't know much about as far as what kind of research has gone on there, but even just as a Canadian, wouldn't that enrage you that even in our country that they want to put this thing back to zero and spend all this money on it and not acknowledge what they've looked at for 80 years?
Well, I'm going to throw a little wrench in what you're saying because they already have put it back to zero. 0 day for current ufology happened in 2004 with the USS Nimitz case, which if you go back to the NASA meeting, they debunked one of the videos of the Go Fast video, which should now be called the Go Slow video, in them saying that that craft, whatever it was only moving at 40 miles an hour. Are you telling me a highly trained Top Gun pilot cannot tell the difference between something going 400 miles an hour and something going 40 miles an hour? I'm sorry, I'm siding with the pilot on that one. I'm not siding with the video analysts of a scientist. I mean, that is where it gets difficult, at least for me, in regards to this. So then comes budget again, because that's what it always comes down to is money, 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 money. Well, money hasn't produced any answers yet in this. So what are we spending that money on? And what is that money for? Is it UAP, which is man-made? Or are we actually looking to see whether or not we are alone or not? Two different subjects, two highly controversial subjects. We need to know the answer, Matt.
I totally agree. Going back to what you were just mentioning about the NASA debunking or whatever you want to call it of that video, one of the things that I read, and I don't know who discovered this, but they got the data off of social media, open source, and B, in their calculation, they never calculated the winds aloft at that point. So this 40 miles per hour thing was likely BS. So why would a NASA scientist with incomplete data, who hasn't spoken to the pilot at all, hasn't spoken to any witnesses, didn't account for winds aloft, why would this guy get up in front of the public and make this declaration that it was only 40 miles an hour when it's, bad data in, bad data out, and the guy had bad data? It just makes me scratch my head. Now, moving on, the third point that Mellon makes, which we spoke about earlier and would love for you to elaborate on, Mellon states that we can handle it as humans. He says, although disclosure would initially frighten and shock many people, polling data reveals that most Americans already believe we are not alone in the universe. Further, a high percentage of Americans already believe some UAP are, in fact, extraterrestrial craft. Our ancestors persevered despite profound fears of the unknown, and so can we. I don't know. I mean, I would like to think that, but as you said, humanity or society showed its ugly face in how we behaved, in the selfish way that we all behaved during COVID.
Well, I mean, look, he is right in the statement that initially people are going to be frightened and shocked. But you know what? There are a high interest in Americans who have been polled who believe angels are real. It doesn't mean that they're not going to freak out, Matt, when all of a sudden the heavens open up, and if Armageddon started and the revelation really kicks off in the Bible, okay, are we going to see angels? Well, 63% of us believe so. Okay, so the fact is, there is no mention of the fact that they were watching COVID and how people treated people. Look at the grocery stores. Look at everything that kind of pushed through on that. Look at we call it Pharmasave up here, London Drugs or whatever, like places where pharmacies are, pardon me, okay? They're still struggling to get certain antibiotics and narcotics and drugs and everything to help people out. They're still struggling. Where's the kickback? We're still feeling the effects because certain people felt they needed to buy 5,000 pills of whatever it was when they only needed 100 pills. But you never know. This was it. They were locking us down forever, right? You never know. So I think that statement, to keep it short, is very, very underwhelming on his part. Your mic's on mute.
Sorry, I'm a little bit under the weather, so I've been coughing off camera. So thanks for keeping me honest there. We'll move on to the next one just to make sure we kind of get through as many points as we can and then take some audience questions. Another thing that he notes, disclosure is only a matter of time. Foreign nations and civilian scientific groups around the world are undertaking ever more sophisticated and extensive UAP collection campaigns. Specifically, the Galileo Project at Harvard, led by Dr. Avi Loeb, the former chairman of the Harvard Department of Astronomy, is a case in point. Numerous other domestic and foreign groups, ranging from the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies to Americans for Safe Aerospace and Enigma Labs, which I don't know what's going on with them. They're not very transparent, in my opinion, are also investigating as many foreign governments. So the question is, does the government risk looking like fools if somebody beats them to the punch? If let's say Sunday or Monday something comes out that we have these craft, or or somebody comes forward in a month from now with some significant information, doesn't the U.S. government risk looking like a fool and like they were hiding something all that time if substantial evidence comes out that, yes, all of this is real?
Can I play a hypothetical situation here for you?
Absolutely.
Let's say, Matt, let's say, for instance, the United States government has a booklet or a list of people they know are being taken by extraterrestrials. Let's say there's this hypothetical list out there. Could you imagine the lawsuits of disclosure if you found out Matt Ford has been taken 36 times in the last 27 years and he has had surgeries to his legs, his mouth, his eyes, his brain. He's been implanted. He's been reimplanted. He's part of the hybridization program. It sounds woo, okay? But there is a lot of things that the government doesn't want to know. This goes far beyond having technology and reverse engineering to beat the Russians and the Chinese. Let's remember, the Russians and the Chinese are just coming out with stealth aircraft. We're mothballing stealth aircraft in the US because we've already passed that 45 years ago. Okay, now every craft has stealth in it. What do they, if they are getting rid of the F-117 and they're phasing out the B-2s for the B-21s, okay, what does that mean that they actually have running out of Area 51 and places like that? That's what we got to think of. What about the technology that they don't want their adversaries to get? Yes, they want the governments around the world to play ball. They tried it here in Canada. It's not working because in Canada, they want to use a more scientific method of trying to figure out what UFOs are. The Defense Ministry of Canada came out and said there is zero threat and zero threat narrative by anything UAP in Canadian airspace. Well, that goes against the grain of what we have heard south of the border. So which is it? Granted, we're only a country of 37.5 million. You're about 370 million. So there's a big difference there, okay? Plus, you guys are the police officers of the world. Love it or hate it, that's your job, okay? So you have to try and get these governments on board. But who's to say that it couldn't be the president of France or the prime minister of the UK or the prime minister of Canada, heaven forbid, okay, or the supreme leader of North Korea who comes out and says we have a crashed aircraft, and these are the bodies that came along with it. Does that put egg on the US's face? No, but what it does do is it changes the narrative. Because if it happens anywhere else, people are all of a sudden going to be turning, hey, America, what's in your closet? NASA, what's in your closet? That's what it is.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
Well, and touching back or going back to the woo, which to me is not woo. These are very legitimate questions to ask as far as what have they been hiding in terms of non-human intelligence interacting with us? And one of my theories has been that why the clock seemed to start with the tic-tac and why the Air Force has been completely non-cooperative is the legal perspective that you're talking about. So if the amount of legal exposure would be absolutely enormous if they were to admit that they've known all of this has been going on for 80 years. They have no control of it. They can't protect the airspace, which we're spending billions of dollars to have the Air Force do that. And then let's say that the abduction phenomenon is real. For them to admit that, and the fact that they never warned your family that that was a possibility and that they can't control it. The legal, it would be a firestorm of
absolutely.
You can't. I don't think you can even wrap your head around it.
If I found out the Canadian government I'm an experiencer. For people who don't know me, I am an experiencer, and I'm very open about it on my show. Okay. If I found out the Canadian government had a list with my name on it and times and places I have been taken, Matt, I'm calling a lawyer.
100%.
Okay. And I'm going after it. I want my money, because what I've experienced, yes, half of it's been good, but the other half hasn't been too polite. Not very Canadian of the aliens to be doing what they've done to me.
Right.
Okay. And to other people that I know personally. Okay. I know one person who lives a living hell almost every day because of what's going on. And I would trust this person with my children, with my life. Okay. And this person is very, very real to me. Okay. And their experiences are very real. But I mean, there is, that is an issue. You bring it up, very cool. But I want to bring up, with the disclosure, as a matter of time, we had just mentioned how Galileo, Enigma Labs, and other places are coming together to kind of form a coalition. We had just mentioned that right off the bat. Isn't that interesting how he had it in his article as well? And yet his counterpart, Mr. Lou Elizondo, has been very public that he's not a fan of Enigma Labs.
Well, the thing, I put up a post on our Twitter, on our Twitter account, asking someone from Enigma Labs to come on our show. We would ask very fair questions, give them a chance to address the sort of questions people have about them. The fact that this is funded by Peter Thiel or however you say his name, not a peep. And so you have to ask yourself, what are they hiding? Why are they not wanting to tell you what they're up to, what their funding is, what their goals are? It's like, it's looking into a black hole. And if I were their PR person, I would freaking fire him, because I think from a PR perspective, the Enigma Labs front-facing presence is just a joke, and it's suspicious.
Well, let's just remember that their PR person, not to name names, has also claimed that he is a journalist and has never worked in journalism or worked for a journalistic outfit in his life. Okay, so how someone says they are a PR expert and a former journalist on their LinkedIn and their own bio, it baffles me. That's one of the big question marks that I have regarding this. I mean, if I'm Enigma Labs, I'm hiring a professional PR firm to take this on, not somebody who has just created a profile and decided, hey, I woke up one morning, I wrote a blog, and now I'm a journalist, or I'm an investigative journalist. It's not how it works. And it baffles me that has happened.
I totally agree. Okay, the final thing I want to touch on before we get to a few questions, his the number 9 comment, 10 was spark vitally needed collaboration, but number 9 I thought was really important, and this touches on what we just spoke about. So his number 9 comment, no imminent threat. It seems unlikely that revealing the truth would change the pattern of UAP behavior we have been observing for decades. Furtive activities around the planet and in our oceans are likely to continue. In the event that there is a threat, our chances of survival are obviously far greater if we acknowledge the possibility and work with other nations to develop an effective deterrent. Although we are not experiencing acts of aggression, there is a pattern of persistent surveillance around DoD test ranges and facilities, especially our nuclear weapons capabilities. Hopefully, any interest in our military capabilities is purely defensive. Yeah, so this is, I think, a really important question, because if you look at the fact that UAP all have signature management, they are being stealthy most of the time, most of the time. So you have to ask yourself, well, why are they being stealthy? Why are they not, appearing on the White House lawn? And that's where sometimes I think that maybe this isn't all good news, but it's important. Like, put it this way: like, if there's a serial robber running around through your neighborhood and they are armed with, say, an AR-15, and everybody in their home has just a handgun, you would want the police to tell you that, hey, this person that is outgunning you is running around your neighborhood. You may be out armed, and maybe it's kind of a bad analogy, but the point is it's better to just tell people so we as a species can decide what this means to us, what this means to our family. If it's we as a species have been very creative in terms of our survival. And I just think that it's better to just let everyone know. What are your thoughts?
Well, first off, Chris Mellon has to take some responsibility for the threat narrative because he's been spinning that for the last 6.5 years. Okay, much like anybody who has gone on mainstream media. So in one sense, you got 6.5 years of people like Mellon spinning this is a threat narrative, including to the government of Canada, and then walking away when they talk science instead of aerial threats. Now you know why talks between Canada and the US broke down on this right there over the threat narrative. There's something I'm sure your audience didn't know. Okay, but here you have a man who's been talking about threats, and now you're saying in your latest plea that there is no imminent threat. Ladies and gentlemen, we have proof, okay, through scripture, through writings, through archaeological diggings and findings, that it's a good chance that these craft have been coming around for millennia. For millennia, not centuries. It hasn't been since Roswell being the first time. Millennia. Do you really think that if a species that has the technology to cross the galaxy from wherever they are to get here is going to be worried about nuclear weapons? Number one, I'm sure they're a little bit more advanced than our primitive nukes that can blow up the planet. But more importantly is this: if they wanted to take us over, if the extraterrestrials were here and wanted to take us over, why would they wait for us to advance when they could have had us when the greatest weapon on earth was a spear or a bow and arrow or a cannon or a musket? They waited until we had powerful nuclear weapons that we could send into space? Come on. I mean, that's just ludicrous thinking and fear-mongering on behalf of the government people who are talking about this. That's my opinion, of course, my opinion. But, you know, I don't think that there is a threat narrative. I'm not saying that every extraterrestrial is good. Not saying that at all. Okay, there's 8 billion people on this planet, or nearly 8 billion people. Not all of us are good. There's a reason why there's more than 2 million people incarcerated in the United States alone, because not all of us are good people. And I believe it's the same way with extraterrestrials, but I think in most part, the good outweighs the bad.
Okay, so we've got about 8 minutes left, so I want to get to a few listener questions. So Nick M asks, what's Dave's perspective on Scott Kelly's statements at the NASA astronaut Scott Kelly, his statements during the NASA event?
I think he was bullying. I think he was chest beating. You know, this is a man whose biggest confirmation of anything is a Bart Simpson balloon. I mean, you're making fun of the topic. He tried to roll back on it a little bit, but it didn't work. The damage was done. The snickering and the laughter had happened. Okay. I would like somebody to ask Scott Kelly, which astronauts did you talk to? And then let's get him to watch Darcy Weir's videos and talk about the astronauts that have had these incursions. Are they lying to Scott Kelly, or are they lying on the radio frequency that was picked up and recorded? What's the truth? No, what he was trying to do was he was trying to shut down the conversation because he doesn't want NASA to look bad. That's exactly what he was doing, and he accomplished it.
I completely agree. Okay, next question. What's your perspective on the Wilson Davis notes?
I think there is something there. I have personal reasons why I've never really gone into the Wilson Davis notes and never really focused on them. So I'm not as educated on them as possible. But I know enough people who have investigated this, who've done great work on this, who say that they are very legit. We know that they have been sworn in as testimony, as evidence to Congress. I'll be interested to see what goes on there, but we're not going to know anything until Admiral Wilson finally admits that they're real.
That question, by the way, was from Scott Boardley. So, Scott, thanks for that question. Now, here's another one here. If we can't trust a slow disclosure process engineered by insiders using the threat narrative, what does Dave think is the most likely or effective path to ordinary citizens getting some form of quote-unquote official truth about UFOs and NHI?
Well, I think what has to happen is if we as the public want disclosure, we have to put pressure on them. Screw the UFO community, screw the podcasts, the shows. We have to put pressure on these people, not cheap shots, not insults, but pressure on them to state what is disclosure. Okay? Define what disclosure is. Because right now we're running around like a bunch of chickens with our heads cut off, and nobody seems to be able to answer what is disclosure. We need to know what disclosure is first before we can call for it.
Here's our final question, which I would like to know this as well, and I'm not sure who this. Don't have the person's name here. Sorry about that. But does Dave think whistleblowers are coming soon?
I think we're going to see a lot more whistleblowers coming soon. I think we're going to see a lot more military people coming soon. I think we're going to see a lot more people step up. The problem that we're going to have, Matt, is I don't think those names or the information they provide is going to be made public. And that is the one big issue that I see with the whistleblowers. Look, some of them can't because maybe a lot of this stuff is linked to clandestine missions around the world. Maybe it's linked to top secret missions that can't have anything said. And those people do need to be protected. But you know what? If it's somebody like Kevin Day, or if it's somebody like Robert Salas, we know that they've already testified. We need to be able to hear those hearings. And there has to be a place where some of these whistleblowers, if they choose to, can come out and talk to the public about this. I think that's very important. But on the flip side, it's all anecdotal and there is continuity between them. The majority of them are going to be either current or former military or retired military. Why is their statement better than Matt Ford's? Why is their statement better than any other experiencers out there who's had a great experience? Well, they'll tell you, well, that's what Enigma Labs is for, right? So we're going to see where it goes. I'm hopeful that maybe more eyewitness testimony will open the eyes of many more people, especially elected officials. But for the overall aspect, I don't see whistleblowers helping the overall conclusion of confirmation or disclosure.
Very good. Dave, thank you very much for joining us. So how can people find your wonderful show? I love listening to it. I listen to pretty much every episode I can. How can people find you?
If you're watching on YouTube, you can subscribe to us at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio, Twitter @Spaced Out Radio, same as our website, on Instagram @Spaced Out Radio Show. And like Matt's show, The Good Trouble Show, we are on every major podcast network as well, or you can find us on our website for our terrestrial radio stations.
Dave, I'm so glad you came on the show. I've really been looking forward to this. The times I've come on your show, I've really enjoyed it. And I have to say, man, you got one hell of a beard.
Well, you know what? I can finally breathe by taking off this tie here. So
you have to hold the tie. I want to see the pattern of this tie.
You know what? I went with my Marvin the Martian
I
guy
love it.
today. Just to suit you a little bit.
I love that.
That was strictly for you, my friend. Strictly for you.
Back when cartoons were great cartoons. That's all I've got to say.
And you were still allowed to laugh.
Exactly. All right, Dave Scott, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us again. If you enjoyed our show, please hit that subscribe button, thumbs up, all that good stuff. The Twitter algorithm gods will love you. Dave, thanks for joining us, and look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks for coming on.
We'll take care, Matt. Thank you.
Thank you.